In the quiet hours between 1:30 and 4:30 a.m. on Saturday, October 21st, 2023, a horrifying crime unfolded in the heart of Detroit, Michigan. 40-year-old Samantha Wall was found fatally stabbed inside her townhouse. A neighbor, later that morning, discovered her lying on the walkway outside her home, where she had managed to crawl, likely in a desperate attempt to seek help before succumbing to her injuries. As investigators would soon uncover, another person had been outside Samantha's townhouse that night. The pressing question was, had they found the perpetrator or just an unwitting witness? This case is fraught with complexity, straddling the line between a stellar example of rigorous police investigation and a disturbing example of potential miscarriages of justice. As we examine the evidence, the events, and the people involved, you will be left to judge. Was justice served, or did it falter? The scene of the crime, the neighborhood of Lafayette Park, located east of downtown Detroit, is a mix of residential housing, characterized by two large blocks with a secluded green space known as the Greenway running through it. On the western edge of this green space is Juliet Place, a series of townhouse units adjacent to an elementary school. On the morning of October 21, 2023, around 6 o'clock, local resident Kevin Mull stepped out to walk a friend's dog. As he did so, he noticed something unusual on the sidewalk across from his unit, a figure, lying still, with their back facing him. The person, without shoes, was curled up, with legs tucked under. Kevin nudged the figure, hoping for a response, but there was none. The exposed skin was bluish, a clear indication of death. Kevin immediately called for his wife, Jessica, and the two quickly alerted emergency services. Jessica would later learn that the body found by her husband belonged to a dear friend and neighbor, Samantha Wall. In her words, "My husband was out walking our dog, and he told me there is someone, possibly a body, lying on the sidewalk. He tried to nudge them, but they didn't move. There was blood, and the person looked blue." This tragic discovery marked the beginning of a long and complicated investigation. Detroit patrol officers Preston Q. and Eric Dow received the emergency call around 6:30 a.m. They arrived at the scene roughly 20 minutes later. Samantha Wall was lying just steps from her home, her life already lost. An autopsy later confirmed that Samantha had suffered 8 stab wounds, mostly to the head and neck, inflicted from behind. Detective Darren Shue traced a trail of blood from the walkway where Kevin found Samantha back to her front door, which was ajar. Inside, the state of the ground floor suggested a violent struggle. The living room was in disarray, and a large pool of blood was found in the entrance hallway, marking a spot where Samantha likely collapsed. In the kitchen, a fruit bowl lay smashed on the floor, hinting at a confrontation that may have occurred there. While blood stains were found on the stairwell leading to the basement, investigators did not classify the lower level as part of the crime scene. Similarly, the upper level, which included Samantha's bedroom and guest room, showed no signs of disturbance. Her cell phone, an iPhone, was found beneath the living room sofa. Forensic analysis later revealed smudges and a likely footprint on a pillow that had fallen to the floor, suggesting the violence had occurred either during or shortly after the attack. Additional evidence included several footprints at the scene, likely from a barefoot individual. Fingerprints were taken throughout the house, but most were of poor quality and unusable. Those that could be analyzed matched back to Samantha herself. These findings led investigators to rule out the possibility of a burglary gone wrong. Samantha's wallet, cash, purse, car keys, laptop, and other electronics were untouched in plain view. The nature of the attack, a violent stabbing, led detectives to consider it a crime of passion. Such attacks are often personal, fueled by intense emotions. However, the police remained tight-lipped about possible motives, noting that sharing too much could hinder their investigation. "There are details only known to the suspect," they cautioned, underscoring the delicate balance between public transparency and the need for a fair investigation. Who was Samantha Wall? Samantha Wall's death devastated those who knew her. Friends and family described her as a woman with a profound commitment to justice, motivated by the Jewish concept of tikkun olam, or healing the world. As a teenager, Samantha had volunteered with the Friendship Circle, a nonprofit mentoring children with developmental disabilities. The organization, now supporting over 3,000 people in Metro Detroit, benefited greatly from her dedication. She spent 4 summers working at a rape crisis center, wrote for the Michigan Daily on social justice issues, and advocated passionately for progressive causes. Samantha ran daily, rain or shine, loved opera and classical music, and had an extensive book collection. At the time of her death, she was president of the Isaac Agree Downtown Synagogue in Detroit and had initiated an interfaith forum for Muslims and Jews to find common ground. Her untimely death was a tremendous loss, not only to those who knew her personally, but also to the broader community she served. The night before her murder, Samantha attended a friend's wedding near her home. Guests later reported that she seemed in good spirits, and there was no indication of anything unusual. GPS data showed her driving home around 12:30 a.m., and security cameras from a nearby elementary school captured a vehicle entering the parking lot around the same time. At 12:31 a.m., a sensor on Samantha's front door was activated, indicating she had arrived home. The ADT home security system detected movement in the living room from 12:32 a.m. For about an hour. The back door opened briefly, likely for a quick smoke break, before being closed and locked. The outfit Samantha wore to the wedding was later found laid out on her bed upstairs. Her last text, a simple smiley emoji sent at 1:01 a.m., was her final communication. Activity on her phone continued, with apps being opened and closed, until around 1:30 a.m. At 1:24 a.m., the home security system went into idle mode, indicating no movement in the preceding minutes. The next time any sensor was triggered was at 4:20 a.m., when brief movement was detected in the living room. The system returned to idle mode 2 minutes later. Subsequent tests by ADT experts confirmed that the sensors were functioning correctly, providing accurate data within a 12-second margin of real time. The investigation unfolds the fact that the front door was not properly closed or locked after Samantha returned home added to the mystery. A neighbor, James Gunn, recalled waking up around 1:20 a.m. to the sounds of his new puppy whimpering. As he walked the dog outside, he heard voices calling, yelling, and possibly chanting. The design of the neighborhood created an echo effect, making it difficult to determine the direction of the sounds. James later told police he felt guilty for not reporting the sounds earlier, though he could not be certain of their relevance. James' account was troubling but vague. He noted that he might have heard striking casino workers a few blocks away, or perhaps something directly related to Samantha's murder. His smartwatch recorded his movements at 1:21 a.m., overlapping with the final moments when Samantha's security system logged activity before going into idle mode at 1:24 a.m. Investigators also delved into Samantha's personal life. Described as a kind, determined woman, she had an active dating life, but nothing that raised significant suspicion. Her most recent serious relationship was with Jeffrey Herbstman, a data scientist she met through her synagogue 5 years earlier. They dated from the summer of 2022 until July 2023, when they amicably parted ways. Despite the amicable nature of their split, Jeffrey soon became a focal point of the investigation. Weeks passed as detectives combed through digital evidence from cameras in the area, hoping to spot something suspicious. Then, in early November, a shocking twist occurred. Jeffrey, who had been dismissed as a person of interest, seemingly confessed from a parking lot outside a Sheraton hotel in Kalamazoo. Jeffrey called 911, appearing disoriented and distressed. He told police he believed he had killed Samantha, although he had no memory of the event. He explained that he had experienced a psychotic break after smoking cannabis and returning to his hotel room. "I can't shake the feeling that I killed her," he said, his voice filled with confusion and fear. Jeffrey was detained, and his home and car were searched by both the Detroit Police Department and the FBI. Forensic teams analyzed his phone data and communications. During multiple interviews, Jeffrey maintained that he had been in his apartment alone on the night of the murder. There was no blood, DNA, or any other physical evidence linking him to the crime scene, and surveillance footage did not show him near Samantha's building. Jeffrey was suffering from depression, a condition he had been treating with medication, and 3 months of transcranial magnetic stimulation therapy. On November 7, the day of his so-called confession, he was on the second day of a double dosage of an antidepressant known for causing severe side effects, including panic attacks and delusions. The investigators concluded that his mental state and medication had caused his breakdown and false confession. Jeffrey was released, and the investigation returned to square one. A new suspect emerges, with Jeffrey ruled out. The police turned their attention to security footage from around the neighborhood. A new lead emerged, an unidentified male figure seen in the parking lot outside Samantha's building around 4 o'clock. This individual was one of the few people captured on camera in the vicinity at the critical time frame. The figure was later spotted attempting to open car doors and steal items from vehicles. Digital analysts tracked this suspect's movements across the city, eventually linking him to an address at the Alexandrian apartment complex. Using location data from T-Mobile, investigators identified him as Michael Jackson Bolanos, a manager at a local cafe and part-time music producer. Michael also had a history of vehicle theft, adding to the suspicion surrounding him. Though much of the footage was grainy and hard to interpret, some parts clearly showed Michael trying to open car doors and removing items. A white bag he took from a vehicle became a critical piece of evidence, as it provided a visual marker that allowed investigators to trace his movements across the city. Michael's behavior was captured on multiple cameras, including footage showing him wearing surgical gloves shortly before 4 o'clock. When Michael reappeared, he was no longer wearing gloves. The police believed that this 20-minute gap could have been the window during which Samantha was killed. Michael was pulled over during a routine traffic stop and taken to the police station for questioning. He believed he was being interrogated about stolen property and was unaware that he was a murder suspect. During questioning, he initially denied any wrongdoing, but eventually admitted to stealing from cars, though he insisted he never entered anyone's home or committed any violent acts. A search warrant led to the discovery of several knives in Michael's possession, contradicting his earlier statements that he owned only one knife. His jacket, worn on the night of the murder, was found to have trace amounts of Samantha's blood. Forensic testing confirmed the blood match, and Michael was charged with first-degree murder, among other offenses. The trial of Michael Jackson Bolanos began in July 2024, drawing significant public attention. The prosecution argued that the evidence pointed to Michael as the murderer, citing his suspicious behavior, his possession of knives, and the traces of Samantha's blood on his clothing and belongings. However, Michael's defense attorney, Brian Brown, mounted a vigorous defense, arguing that the crime was one of passion, not a random act of violence by a thief. The defense questioned the timeline of the attack, suggesting that Samantha had been attacked earlier in the night and left unconscious. The prosecution contended that the brief movements detected by the EDT system at 4:20 a.m. marked the moment of the murder, aligning with Michael's presence in the area. They argued that Michael had entered Samantha's open door and attacked her. Yet, the defense challenged this narrative, highlighting gaps in the timeline and pointing to the lack of direct evidence placing Michael inside the home. After 6 weeks of trial and 23 hours of deliberation over 5 days, the jury reached a partial verdict. Michael was acquitted of first-degree premeditated murder and home invasion, but found guilty of lying to the police. The jury was deadlocked on the felony murder charge, resulting in a mistrial for that count. Judge Van Achten sentenced Michael to 18 months to 15 years for lying to police. However, due to legal precedents, the judge ruled that Michael could not be retried for felony murder because the jury had already acquitted him of first-degree murder. As of now, no one has been held accountable for the murder of Samantha Wall. Her family and friends remain heartbroken, struggling with the loss and the lack of closure. They continue to push for justice, convinced that Michael Jackson Bolanos is the culprit. Yet, the legal system has reached an impasse, leaving many questions unanswered. Samantha's life was dedicated to justice and helping others. Ironically, in death, the justice she fought so hard for seems elusive. Her loved ones, the community, and those who believed in her mission are left waiting, hoping that one day the full truth will come to light. Thank you for joining me on The Dark Evidence. If you found this case compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated on more in-depth investigations into cases that challenge our understanding of justice. See you next time as we continue to explore the darkest corners of human behavior